The final note of Lena Marcellus's violin quivered in the air, haunting, fragile, almost pleading. For a moment, the marble ballroom of the Kade Foundation Gala stood utterly still, suspended in that sound. Then the applause broke, a wave of thunder rolling across gold and glass. Under the crystal chandeliers, Lena forced her lips into a smile. Her bow hand trembled slightly as she lowered her instrument. She should have felt proud. This was the moment she had worked for all her life, but all she could taste was blood. A faint, metallic sting on her lip, hidden beneath lipstick and stage light. "Just breathe," she whispered under her breath. "Just finish." Cameras flashed. Elegant faces smiled up at her, each one wearing wealth-like armor. The applause wasn't for her, not really. It was for the illusion of generosity, for the billionaire who hosted this charity, for the pretense that the city's richest still had hearts that could be moved by music. She glanced at her music stand. Taped beneath the score was a photo, her younger brother, Elias, his grin too wide for a hospital bed. He was the reason she'd said yes to this performance, the reason she'd spent every waking hour practicing. His next surgery depended on tonight's success. If she played well enough, if the right people noticed her, she might be able to save him. The city's elite didn't hire the broken. They hired brilliance. And Lena Marcellus couldn't afford to be anything less. Before we continue, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching so YouTube can bring you more of these stories. Backstage, the air was thicker. Perfume, sweat, the distant echo of laughter and power. The velvet curtains fell shut behind her, silencing the applause. She gripped her violin like a lifeline, her heart still hammering from the performance. Then she heard him. "Miss Marcellus," Damien Locke said, his tone too casual, too sure of itself. The senator's son, handsome in the way arrogance often is. "That was beautiful." She turned, forcing another smile. "Thank you, Mr. Locke." He stepped closer. "You play with feeling. Not many do anymore." His eyes weren't on her face. The scent of his cologne was thick, sharp, and suffocating. When he brushed a strand of hair from her shoulder, her stomach turned. "Excuse me," she murmured, trying to step around him. His hand closed around her wrist, hard. "Don't run off. We should celebrate." "Please," she said, low, shaking. "Let go." The music from the ballroom muffled the sound of her struggle. Laughter, the pop of a champagne cork, a string quartet beginning another piece. Then came a crash, glass breaking, and her breath hitched. A torn strap, a hand pressed too hard, a muffled laugh that wasn't hers, then nothing but silence. She didn't remember leaving, only the sound of her heels against marble as she stumbled into the dressing room. The door slammed behind her. She pressed her back to it, shaking. Her reflection stared back from the mirror. Pale skin, mascara smudged, lip split, the soft gold fabric of her gown torn. She touched her face and winced. Her violin case sat open on the counter, the bow broken clean in two. "Get it together," she whispered, clutching the vanity. "You can't fall apart now." Her voice cracked anyway. A sob slipped out, small and sharp. She pressed her fist to her mouth to silence it. The scent of cologne still lingered, proof that monsters wore tuxedos, not claws. She dabbed at her lip with a tissue, leaving smudges of red across pale skin. She needed to disappear before anyone saw her like this, before the press caught her weakness, before this ruined everything. She didn't hear the door open, just the quiet click of a lock sliding into place. "Miss Marcellus." She froze. Adrian Kade stood in the doorway, tall, impeccably dressed. Every inch of him radiated quiet control, the kind that made powerful men nervous. His name carried weight in the city, whispered in boardrooms and back alleys alike. Rumor said he could destroy a man's life with a phone call. And yet, in that moment, his gaze softened just slightly. "That was quite a performance," he said. Her throat tightened. "Thank you, Mr. Kade." He stepped forward, the movement smooth, deliberate. His eyes swept across her, the trembling hand, the blood, the torn strap she'd tried to hide. "Who touched you, Lena?" It wasn't curiosity. It was a warning disguised as calm. She shook her head too quickly. "It's nothing. I fell. The stairs." "Don't," he interrupted. His voice didn't rise, but it carried weight that made her chest ache. "Don't lie to me." He took another step, close enough that she could see the faint scar near his jaw, the one the tabloids never mentioned. "That's not a fall," he said softly. "That's a handprint." Her composure broke. A tear slid down her cheek. "Please, don't make this worse." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Worse?" His tone dropped lower. "You think this is the worst it gets?" He pulled his phone from his pocket. "You'll tell me his name, and I'll handle it." She hesitated, then whispered, "Damien Locke." The silence that followed was absolute, then a quiet exhale. "Good." He made a single call, his tone clipped, calm. "West Hall, bring the medical kit, now." When he hung up, he shrugged off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. It was heavy, warm, smelling faintly of smoke and rain. "You're not going back out there?" he said. "Not tonight." She blinked, confused. "Why are you helping me?" He paused, his gaze steady. "Because I know what it looks like when power thinks it can take whatever it wants." He brushed his thumb gently under her chin, lifting her face toward him. "And because you remind me what restraint costs." Her heart stuttered. "Do you trust me to make this right?" She should have said no, but for the first time all night she didn't feel small. "Yes," she whispered. Adrian nodded once. "Then go home, Lena." His eyes darkened, a promise hidden in the words. "And don't read the news tomorrow." He turned toward the door, already dialing another number. The golden light from the hallway framed him like a shadow made flesh. Lena clutched his jacket tighter. Somewhere beyond these walls, men were laughing, drinking, believing themselves untouchable. By morning, some of them would be gone, and Lena Marcellus would learn what it meant to be loved and protected by a monster. The city lights shimmered against the black glass of Adrian Kade's office window, fractured and distant, the kind of beauty only the powerful could afford to ignore. He didn't look away from them as his driver's voice murmured through the car's comms. "She's on her way home, sir." Adrian's fingers tightened once around the glass in his hand before he set it down, untouched. He had no taste for whiskey tonight. The faint stain of blood on his jacket sleeve told him enough. He'd seen blood before, plenty of it, in boardrooms and backrooms alike, but not like that. Not hers. He closed his eyes briefly, and in the silence of memory, her voice trembled back to him. "Please, don't make this worse." Worse. The word sat like ash on his tongue. An hour earlier, the ballroom had been emptied with a single look. No raised voice, no order. Just Adrian standing at the threshold of the dressing room, his jacket draped over Lena Marcellus's shoulders, his expression sharp enough to cut through noise and obedience alike. The event coordinator had tried to speak, something about donors waiting, press photos, the senator's entourage. Adrian didn't need to answer. One cold glance, and the man had disappeared, dragging confusion and fear with him. Now the marble corridors echoed with the hush of a building afraid to breathe. "Sit," Adrian said quietly. Lena hesitated, still clutching the jacket closed around her. The weight of it made her feel both safe and small. I should go. You'll sit. The words weren't harsh. They were inevitable. She obeyed, perching on the edge of a chaise near the vanity mirror. Her reflection looked worse in the quiet. A ghost in borrowed gold silk, mascara streaked, lip still raw. Adrian knelt in front of her, not touching her, not yet, just studying her face as though it were a crime scene. Tell me what happened, he said. She stared at the floor. I fell. Silence. When he finally spoke, the calm in his tone was more dangerous than anger. You're lying. Her head jerked up. I'm not. He tilted his head, slightly, gaze unwavering. You bruise easily then? Split your lip falling on carpet? Her breath caught. I told you, she said, voice breaking. It's nothing. Please, don't make trouble. Adrian rose slowly, the motion deliberate, controlled. Trouble, he repeated, testing the word. He turned toward the door and gestured once. A man appeared almost instantly, tall, severe, dressed in black. Kade's head of security, Vincent Rowe. Find out what happened backstage, Adrian said without looking at him. Lena shot to her feet. No, please, don't. The command in her voice stopped even Vincent mid-step. Adrian turned back to her, expression unreadable. Her eyes were wide, pleading. You don't understand. If you do this, if people talk, my career's over. I'll lose everything. I need this job. He walked closer until her reflection trembled beside his in the mirror. Beauty and shadow. You're not losing anything tonight, Lena. His voice dropped to a murmur. They are. She shook her head, tears slipping free. You can't just... Yes, he interrupted softly. I can. There was no arrogance in it, just fact. Adrian reached into his pocket, pulled a linen handkerchief, and held it out. When she didn't move, he dabbed gently at the blood on her lip himself. His touch was steady, almost reverent. You shouldn't have had to play for men like that, he said quietly. You were meant for stages that don't smell like money and politics. She almost laughed, a sharp, broken sound. Those stages don't pay hospital bills. That silenced him for a heartbeat. He folded the handkerchief and slipped it into his pocket like evidence. Get her home, he told Vincent. Discreetly. Lena's voice came out small. Why are you doing this? Adrian's gaze flicked to her, not cold, not warm, just honest. Because power doesn't change what I am. It only gives me a reason to be worse when I need to. She didn't understand what that meant. Not yet. He brushed a loose strand of hair from her face, and for a moment she saw something in his expression. Grief, maybe, or memory. Do you trust me to make this right? He asked again, quieter this time. Her throat worked around the answer. Yes. The single syllable sealed something she couldn't name. Adrian stepped back. Then go home, Lena. Outside, the night had turned sharp with rain. Vincent escorted her through the side exit to the waiting car, shielding her from the flashes of cameras that still prowled near the gala's front steps. She paused before getting in, glancing back once, toward the tall figure silhouetted in the ballroom doorway. Adrian stood perfectly still, one hand in his pocket, his phone glowing faintly in the other. The wind caught the hem of her gown, pulling it like a whisper across the pavement. He didn't wave, didn't move, just watched until the car door shut and the taillights disappeared into the night. Then he spoke softly into his phone. Vincent, he said, his tone like the edge of a blade. Locke's security detail. Where are they now? A pause. Then, good. Don't stop until you have them. He ended the call, slipping the phone back into his jacket. The blood on his cuff had dried to rust. He looked down at it, expression calm, voice almost a whisper. No one touches what's mine. The city outside glittered, unaware, uncaring. Somewhere in its veins, men laughed over drinks, still certain of their safety. By dawn, they wouldn't be. Adrian Kade's promise hung heavy in the silence. Tonight, monsters would feed, and he would call it justice. Rain slid down the windows of the black car like melted glass, softening the city's edges. Adrian Kade sat in the back seat, still and silent, the dim light from passing street lamps cutting his reflection into sharp, precise fragments. His cuff was clean now, the blood washed away, but he could still see it. He could still see her. Lena's face when she said, "Please don't make this worse." The way she clutched his jacket like a shield, the trembling in her voice when she whispered, "I trust you." He'd built his empire on silence and fear, but that sound, the small broken thread of trust, had followed him home like a curse. "Mr. Kade?" Vincent's voice came from the front seat. "They're waiting." Adrian's gaze drifted to the neon reflection of a name painted in gold across the glass door ahead. The Sovereign Room. An exclusive cigar lounge where the city's elite went to make quiet sins disappear. "Good," he said. "Let's not keep them comfortable." The room smelled of smoke and money. Damien Locke sat at the center table, flanked by 3 men in tailored suits, the kind who mistook wealth for invincibility. They laughed when Adrian entered, though the sound was strained. "Kade," Damien greeted, raising a glass. "Didn't expect you here tonight. Thought you'd be shaking hands with senators, not scaring them." Adrian smiled, or something close to it. "I had a more urgent engagement." He didn't sit right away. Just looked at each of them in turn, his expression unreadable. Then, finally, he took the seat opposite Damien. The bodyguards by the door shifted subtly, closing the exit. "You were at my gala last night," Adrian said evenly. "Enjoy yourself?" Damien smirked. "It was a good event. Your musician was passionate." The word slithered across the table. One of the men chuckled. Adrian's fingers brushed against the edge of his glass. Slow, deliberate. "Her name is Lena Marcellus." "Yeah?" Damien said, leaning back. "Pretty thing. Little too shy for her own good." Adrian leaned forward. The air changed, subtle, suffocating. His voice was low, controlled, the sound of a storm deciding where to fall. "I know what you did backstage." The laughter stopped. "I suggest you start running." Damien's smirk faltered. "Excuse me?" Adrian's eyes flicked to Vincent standing in the corner like a shadow. "Show him." Vincent placed a phone on the table, screen lit. A grainy security clip played, grainy but clear enough. Damien's hand gripping Lena's wrist, the flash of gold fabric, her flinch. Damien's drink trembled in his hand. "You have no idea who my father is." Adrian's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I do. That's why you'll disappear quietly." When Damien opened his mouth again, Adrian simply lifted a hand. Silence fell like a command. "I built this city on contracts and leverage," he said softly. "You built your life on your father's last name. Tell me, Damien, what happens when that name stops protecting you?" No one answered. Adrian rose, straightening his cuff. "You'll find out before dawn." He walked out before any of them could stand. Vincent followed, leaving the faint scent of smoke and fear behind them. By morning, the news broke quietly, not front page, but buried between business columns and obituaries. 4 prominent heirs missing after private club incident. Adrian didn't read the details. He didn't need to. Instead, he called Lena. She answered on the second ring, her voice hushed. "Mr. Kade?" "You're safe," he said simply. "No one will bother you again." There was a pause, long and heavy. What did you do? He let the silence linger. What I had to. You can't, she started, her voice cracking. You can't just destroy people. You play for me now, Lena, he interrupted. I'll handle the rest. She froze. What? For your safety, he said. You'll perform exclusively under my name. Private events, controlled spaces, no press, no backstage monsters. That's not protection, she whispered. That's a cage. It's survival. Her apartment was small, 2 rooms stacked with the quiet chaos of someone who'd learned to live on hope and coffee. She found the envelope on her counter when she came home that evening, thick and heavy, her name written in elegant black ink. Inside, cash. Enough for rent, for groceries, for a few months of breathing room, and a note. Your next month's rent. Play for me again next Friday? AK? Her stomach tightened. She turned the note over, hoping for something else. A signature, a message, an explanation. There was nothing. Just money in silence. She sank into the couch, the envelope still in her lap. The rain outside hadn't stopped, painting the world in streaks of silver. When her phone buzzed, she almost didn't answer. Mr. Kade, she said quietly, her voice smaller than she wanted it to be. He didn't waste words. Did you get it? Yes? Good. Keep it. You'll need it. Why are you doing this? She asked. You can't buy safety, Mr. Kade. A pause, then softly. You'd be surprised what money can silence. She closed her eyes. And what if it silences me too? Adrian's voice, distant but steady, answered, Then I'll find a way to make you sing again. The line clicked dead, leaving her in the hum of rain and quiet fear. She looked down at the envelope, at the promise written in someone else's handwriting, and realized she'd stepped into something much larger than gratitude or protection. She'd become part of his world now, a world where monsters wore suits and love felt like a transaction written in blood. And somewhere in the dark, Adrian Kade poured another drink, eyes cold as the skyline. He'd made a promise, and Adrian Kade never broke those. The morning sunlight bled pale across Lena's apartment floor, cutting through the half-drawn curtains. The city was already awake, horns, chatter, the distant echo of someone's radio. But for the first time in days, she'd slept. Not well, not fully, but long enough to dream. She stood barefoot in the kitchen, waiting for the kettle to boil, the sound sharp and small in the quiet. Her violin rested on the table beside an open notebook of music she hadn't touched since the gala. She tried not to look at it. It reminded her of the blood she'd scrubbed off the wood 2 nights ago. When the kettle hissed, she poured her coffee, the bitter scent grounding her. She turned on the TV more for company than curiosity. Morning news, bright anchors smiling like nothing bad ever happened in their world. Until the words hit her. Breaking news this morning, Senator Locke's son, Damien Locke, has been reported missing following a private event held at the Kade Foundation earlier this week. 4 associates are also unaccounted for. The cup slipped from her hand and shattered against the tile. The reporter kept talking. Investigation ongoing. Last seen leaving a private lounge downtown. Family offering reward. But Lena barely heard any of it. The air thickened until breathing hurt. She didn't need confirmation. She knew. She sank to her knees, fingers pressing against the cool floor, trying to steady herself. The smell of spilled coffee and porcelain dust filled the air. He did it. Adrian Kade, the man who'd given her safety wrapped in silk and steel, the man who'd told her not to read the news. Now she understood why. Her phone rang. The sound made her flinch. Hello? Miss Marcellus? A calm feminine voice, efficient. "This is Sophia Vale, Mr. Cade's assistant. He requests your presence at the Cade Tower. A car is on its way." Lena's voice came out thin. "Why?" "Mr. Cade prefers to explain in person." The line went dead. The elevator to Cade Tower was lined with mirrored glass. She avoided her reflection. It felt like staring at a stranger, a woman draped in someone else's jacket, standing inside a building that scraped the clouds. The doors opened to silence. Adrian's office stretched like a cathedral of shadow and glass, the skyline bleeding silver through the windows. He stood with his back to her, hands in his pockets, as if the city below existed only to keep him company. "Miss Marcellus," he said without turning, "you came." "I didn't have much of a choice." Her voice cracked, then steadied. "You did it, didn't you?" He faced her. His expression was unreadable, calm, too calm. "What exactly are you asking?" "Don't do that." She took a step forward, her hands trembling. "Don't pretend. The news, the disappearances, Damien Locke and those men, they're gone, and you—" "I handled it," he said simply. She stared at him. "Handled it?" Adrian moved around his desk, each step measured. "You were assaulted in my building, at my event, by men who believed they could act without consequence. I corrected their mistake." Her breath caught. "You killed them." "I removed them." His tone didn't change. "You don't need to know the difference." The room tilted, or maybe she did. "You can't just erase people." "I can." His voice dropped lower, quiet enough to make the words colder. "And I did." Lena's pulse hammered in her ears. "Why?" Adrian stopped in front of her, close enough that she could see the faint shadows under his eyes, the exhaustion that didn't belong to a man used to losing sleep. "Because you were shaking," he said softly. "Because I saw fear in your eyes and I couldn't stand it." She stepped back, heart pounding. "That doesn't make it right." He smiled faintly. "Not cruel, not kind, just tired. You're alive because of the things I do that aren't right." Silence stretched between them, thick and heavy. Finally, she whispered, "What did you do?" Adrian's answer was almost a sigh. "I cleaned up your mess. That's what monsters are for." The words hit her harder than she expected. Her throat closed around them. He said it like confession, not pride. She shook her head slowly. "You shouldn't have." "Don't tell me what I shouldn't have done." His voice cut through the air, low and sharp. "You asked me to leave it alone. I didn't. You think that makes me evil?" "Maybe. But I've lived with that long before you walked into my world." He turned away again, looking out at the city below. "Do you think the police would have helped you? The senator's son? His connections? They would have buried you, Lena. He would have walked free. I simply chose not to let him." Her heart ached with something she couldn't name. Gratitude, horror, both tangled in the same breath. "You scare me," she admitted, softly. "I should. But I don't know if it's because of what you did, or because part of me is glad you did it." He looked back at her then, and for the first time something flickered behind his eyes. Not victory, not even relief. Just the smallest trace of sadness. "That's how it starts," he murmured. "You mistake safety for salvation." She took a step closer, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "You're not a monster." He almost smiled, just barely. "No," he said, "but I know how to play one." The wind outside pressed against the glass, and for a moment the entire city felt small. Lena stood there, between fear and something that looked too much like trust, realizing that the man who had saved her might never be able to save himself. Rain painted the city in silver streaks that night. It hissed softly against the glass walls of Adrian Cade's penthouse, the sound threading through the silence like a heartbeat. The skyline glowed, a restless constellation of ambition and deceit, and somewhere beneath it all, Lena Marcellus stood in borrowed light, her violin pressed beneath her chin. She didn't remember agreeing to come here. One moment, Adrian's assistant had said, "Mr. Cade requests your company for dinner." And the next, she was here, barefoot on marble floors, the weight of his world pressing down on her like the air itself was different at this altitude. The first note rose and shivered, fragile and raw. The melody wasn't one she'd written down. It was the kind that bled out on its own. Every stroke of the bow carried the tremor of the past week, the pain, the fear, the unspoken confession that followed her everywhere. Adrian sat by the window, one hand wrapped loosely around a glass of whiskey he hadn't touched. His eyes followed her the way a storm follows the horizon, quiet, patient, inevitable. When the last note faded, Lena lowered her bow, chest rising and falling. "You wanted me to play," she said softly. "Now you've heard me." He didn't respond immediately. The silence stretched thick as smoke. Then, "I didn't ask you here for the music." Her fingers tightened on the violin. "Then why?" He stood, setting the untouched drink aside. The light caught on the sharp line of his jaw, the shadows beneath his eyes. "Because I owe you the truth," he said, "and I don't do that often." Lena watched him cross to a sideboard, pour himself another drink, and lean against the counter. "You want to know who I am, Lena. The papers say I'm a billionaire. The city calls me a philanthropist. The people who matter," he gave a faint, mirthless smile, "they know better." He took a slow sip, eyes fixed on the amber liquid. "My father built this empire out of lies. Real estate, charities, global ventures, all just clean faces for dirty money. Smuggling, blackmail, blood disguised as progress. He made the Cade name untouchable by corrupting everyone who could touch it." Lena's breath caught. "And you?" "I tried to fix it," he said simply. "Spent years pretending money could wash away what built it. That if I smiled for cameras, donated to hospitals, rewrote contracts, maybe I'd be something different." He looked up at her, voice dropping. "But the night I saw you bleeding, I realized pretending doesn't make a man good. It just makes him weak." The words settled between them, heavy and real. Lena's throat tightened. She wanted to argue, to tell him that vengeance wasn't virtue, but something in his eyes stopped her. Not anger, not pride, but the quiet wreckage of someone who'd been drowning for a long time. "You think that night changed you?" she whispered. Adrian set his glass down. "No, it reminded me of what I already was." The rain outside deepened, drumming harder against the glass. Lena stepped closer without meaning to, her hand brushing the piano beside her. "You don't scare me," she said, barely audible. "You should," he murmured. She shook her head. "Maybe what you are is what saved me." He froze. For a long moment, the only sound was the rain and the soft hum of city lights. Then Adrian exhaled. Slow, controlled. The kind of breath that came from a man used to restraint. He closed the distance between them, standing just a few inches away. "You shouldn't say things like that," he said quietly. "Why not?" "Because I might believe you." Her heart stuttered. His hand lifted, not to touch her, but to brush an invisible thread of hair from her face, his fingers hovering near her skin. The nearness was electric, charged with something neither of them wanted to name. She didn't move, didn't breathe. The world narrowed to the space between them, her heartbeat, his scent, the low, dangerous rhythm of something that wasn't supposed to happen but already had. Then the television broke the spell. Breaking update on the Locke investigation. Sources allege that the Kade Foundation may be connected to a series of offshore accounts tied to government contracts. Lena flinched. Adrian turned his head, eyes flicking toward the screen. His expression hardened instantly, the softness erased. "Turn it off," he ordered. She obeyed, fumbling for the remote. The silence returned, colder now, heavier. "They're coming for you," she said. Adrian's voice was calm, almost eerily so. "They've been coming for me my whole life. They just finally have an excuse." Her hands shook. "You can stop this. Tell them." "Tell them what?" He faced her again, eyes sharp. "That I made powerful men disappear? That the senator's son isn't coming home because he hurt someone I cared about?" His tone softened suddenly, dangerously. "If you stay near me, they'll come for you next." She should have stepped back. She didn't. "Then let them." Adrian's jaw tightened, his control fracturing for just a heartbeat. "Don't say that, Lena. I mean it." Her voice trembled, but the words didn't. "You're the first person who's ever made me feel safe, even if I shouldn't." He looked at her for a long time, long enough that she thought he might close the distance, that he might finally give in to the pull between them. But he only whispered, almost to himself, "You don't know what safety costs." Outside, thunder cracked over the skyline. Lena stepped back, her reflection shimmering faintly in the glass behind him. A woman standing beside a man who'd destroyed others to protect her. And though every instinct told her to run, she didn't move, because some part of her, dark and trembling, already knew she would rather face the world's danger than walk away from his. The knock came at dawn. Lena jolted awake to the sound, sharp, deliberate. Not the timid knock of a neighbor, the kind that came with consequence. She pulled on Adrian's oversized shirt, her pulse already racing before she opened the door. Two men in dark suits stood in the hallway, badges glinting beneath the weak morning light. "Miss Marcellus?" The taller one's tone was polite but practiced, federal. "We'd like to ask you a few questions about the Kade Foundation Gala." Her stomach turned cold. I don't know anything." "That's all right," the agent said smoothly. "We just need you to confirm your whereabouts that evening and any interactions you may have had with Damien Locke." The sound of that name felt like glass against her skin. Before she could respond, another voice broke the tension, deep, measured, and unmistakably in control. "She won't be answering any questions without counsel present." Adrian Kade appeared in the doorway of the penthouse suite's adjoining hall, still in his dress shirt, sleeves rolled up, tie abandoned somewhere behind him. His presence filled the space like gravity. The agents exchanged a look. One cleared his throat. "Mr. Kade," Adrian cut him off. "You can address my legal department. They're expecting you." He turned his head slightly. "Mr. Ellison?" A moment later, a man in a tailored suit stepped out from behind him, one of Kade's lawyers, efficient and wordless, holding a folder of neatly stacked documents. The agents hesitated, then retreated with forced professionalism. "We'll be in touch." The door shut. Silence fell. Lena realized she was still clutching the edge of the counter, her knuckles white. "They're investigating you," she whispered. "They've been investigating me for years," Adrian said, his tone flat. "The difference now is that they think they've found leverage." "Me," she said. "Yes," he replied simply. By nightfall, her apartment was no longer hers. Adrian's men had packed her belongings into black cases, efficient and wordless. She protested at first about her independence, her privacy, her brother's photograph on the wall, But Adrian didn't argue. He just said, "You're safer here." And that was that. The elevator opened to his private penthouse, a cathedral of glass and steel perched above the city. The air smelled faintly of cedar and rain. There were no photographs, no signs of a life lived, just clean lines and control. "You live like this?" she murmured. "It's easier to see who's coming," he said without humor. Everywhere she looked, his world pulsed beneath the surface. Bodyguards stationed discreetly in the hall, encrypted phones lighting up with silent notifications, screens displaying maps and numbers she didn't understand. A safe was hidden behind a false panel in the wall. The world called him a philanthropist. But standing there, Lena understood what he really was. A man who had built a fortress, not a home. That night, she found him standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, city lights flickering across his face. The rain had returned, soft and endless. "They'll come after the senator next," Adrian said quietly. "He's threatening a federal inquiry. He wants revenge." Lena folded her arms, watching the rain trace down the glass. "And you'll stop him?" He turned, meeting her gaze. "No," he said. "I'll destroy him." The simplicity of it sent a shiver through her. By morning, the headlines confirmed it. Breaking: Senator Locke's holdings freeze amidst sudden financial collapse. Lena stared at the screen, unable to look away. Bankrupt. Overnight. The same man who'd smiled in every photo, shaking hands with kings, now buried under debt and scandal. She found Adrian in his office, papers strewn across the desk, his composure unbroken. "You did this?" she said. He didn't deny it. He was going to come for you. Now he can't afford to. Her chest tightened. "You ruin people like it's mercy." His eyes lifted to hers, something flickering beneath the calm. "Sometimes it is?" She didn't know how to argue with that, because deep down, a part of her, the same part that still woke up shaking, felt safer because of it. That frightened her more than anything. Later that night, the city slept, but she couldn't. She found him again in the living room, the skyline stretching behind him like a graveyard of light. His jacket was off, his shirt sleeves rolled, a scar running faintly along the back of his hand, thin, pale, and old. "Does it ever stop?" she asked quietly. "Fighting everyone? Controlling everything?" He looked down at his hand, then at her. "Every empire I've built was meant to keep the monsters out," he said. "I didn't realize I'd become one of them." Lena crossed the space between them, slow and deliberate. The rain outside dimmed to a whisper. She reached for his hand, tracing the faint scar with her fingers. The gesture was small, but in a world like his, it felt louder than gunfire. "Then maybe monsters," she whispered, "are what keep us alive." Adrian didn't move, but something in him cracked, not visibly, not violently, but quietly, like a man remembering what it meant to be touched without purpose. His voice came out rough. "You don't belong here, Lena." She met his gaze. "Maybe I don't belong anywhere else." The rain blurred the skyline, the glass catching the faint reflection of two people standing too close in a world that wanted them apart. A man built of steel and sin, and a woman who'd learned that safety sometimes comes with a shadow. Neither of them spoke again. The city hummed beneath them, restless, unknowing. And above it all, Adrian Kade stood beside the one person who made him feel both human and haunted at once. The morning started quietly, too quietly for what it would become. Lena stood in the penthouse foyer, dressed simply for once. Jeans, a wool coat, her violin case slung over her shoulder. The bodyguard stationed by the elevator nodded as she stepped out. "I'll only be gone an hour," she promised. My brother's doctor called. I just need to see him. Adrian didn't argue. He stood near the glass wall, city lights spilling over him like armor. He looked at her, really looked, and something in his gaze softened. "Take 2 of my men," he said. "Adrian, non-negotiable." His tone left no space for protest. She smiled faintly, almost teasing. "You don't trust me to cross the street?" "I don't trust the world not to notice you." It wasn't meant to be romantic, but the way he said it lodged somewhere deep in her chest. She nodded. "I'll be back before you miss me." Adrian's answer was quiet, dangerous. "That's assuming I let you leave long enough to miss." She laughed, the sound breaking through the tension, and disappeared into the elevator. He watched until the doors closed. The feeling in his gut wasn't peace. It was premonition. The call came 47 minutes later, not from Lena, from one of his security detail. The connection was broken, static-laced. "Sir, vehicle hit, bridge." Then nothing. Adrian froze. His glass shattered in his hand, amber whiskey spilling over marble. "Trace the call," he barked to his aide. Within seconds, his control room lit up. Red alerts, signals, satellite feeds. One car abandoned, doors forced open, his men down, and Lena gone. The video arrived 10 minutes later, a simple message. No sender ID, no encryption needed, just a file labeled, "You took something from us." Adrian opened it, the screen flickered to life. Grainy, low light. A room he recognized instantly. The cracked plaster, the stage curtain half torn, an old theater downtown, one his company had bought years ago and never restored. Lena sat tied to a chair under a single hanging bulb. Her lip was bleeding again. Her violin case lay open on the floor beside her, broken strings spilling like veins. A man's voice off-screen. "You think you can erase people, Kade? You erase us, we erase her. Bring yourself alone, no police. You've got 3 hours." The feed cut. Adrian stood still for a full 10 seconds. Then, very quietly, he said, "Leave us." His aides hesitated. "Now." When the room emptied, he leaned both hands on the desk, head bowed. The mask of control cracked, not visibly, but in the small, almost imperceptible tremor of his shoulders. He whispered to no one, "If I call the law, she dies. If I go, they die." Then he straightened, and every trace of humanity vanished. "Get the car ready," he told his driver. "Pull every record on the Locke associates. The ones who vanished left debts. Someone's trying to collect." He moved like a storm contained in human form. Calm, lethal, deliberate. In the armory vault, he opened a steel case and pulled out a small handgun, black as the night outside. The metal gleamed against his palm, catching the faint scar on his hand where Lena's fingers had touched days earlier. "Contact Vega," he ordered into his phone. "I need eyes at the old Royal Theater. Heat scans, exits, all of it." "Understood," came the reply. Adrian holstered the weapon beneath his jacket. "No police interference. If they follow, I'll know." "Sir, are you sure about this?" He paused. "She's the only thing I haven't bought, and the only thing I won't lose." The drive through the city was a blur. Neon bleeding through the rain, streets gleaming like mirrors. Every turn brought back the same image, Lena's face under that harsh light, the way she'd whispered, "Then let them." Days ago, daring the world to break her. He had promised her protection. This was the cost. As the car neared the old theater, he spotted the flicker of headlights on the far side of the block. Too still, too deliberate. Surveillance. He smiled faintly, grimly. "They want a monster," he muttered. "I'll give them one." Inside the Royal Theater, Lena fought to stay awake. The ropes burned her wrists raw. The bulb overhead swung slightly, creaking. She could hear men moving. Laughter, boots scraping against the old wooden floor. "Your boyfriend's taking his time," one of them said. She lifted her head. "You don't know what he's capable of." The man crouched in front of her, smirking. "Oh, sweetheart, we're counting on it." Her pulse pounded in her ears, because she knew, better than any of them, exactly what was coming. And for the first time, she wasn't afraid of it. Adrian's car stopped a block away. He stepped out into the rain without an umbrella, the water soaking through his shirt almost instantly. In his ear, Vega's voice crackled. 5 hostiles inside, 1 target secured center stage. "Stand down," Adrian said. "No witnesses." He started walking. Slow, steady, the kind of calm that comes only before violence. Inside the theater, the bulb flickered, the door creaked open, and the monster they'd summoned finally arrived. The old theater groaned beneath the weight of rain and ghosts. Water leaked through the cracked ceiling, dripping onto warped wood and broken seats. The smell of rot and gun oil thickened the air. And through that ruin walked Adrian Kade. He moved like something ancient, not a man, but the echo of one. Every step was measured, every sound deliberate. The only light came from the flickering bulb above Lena's head, swaying in the dark like a pendulum counting down the seconds before judgment. 5 men. That's what Vega had said. But Adrian didn't need confirmation. He could feel them. The tremor of movement, the scrape of boots, the sharp inhale of men who thought they were hunters. He was done pretending to be prey. The first shot came from the balcony, a sharp crack that shattered the silence. Adrian dropped behind a fallen beam, drew his weapon, and fired once. The body hit the ground before the echo died. Panic rippled through the others. Footsteps scrambled. Shouts, orders barked. Adrian didn't hesitate. He moved through the shadows like a storm given form, his precision too controlled to be fury, too cold to be mercy. Glass exploded. A man screamed. Another fell against the stage curtain, dragging it down in a cascade of red dust and history. "Where is she?" Adrian's voice carried. Low, lethal. No one answered. He found one of them crouched behind an overturned chair, fumbling with his gun. Adrian kicked it away and pressed his boot to the man's chest. "You took her," he said softly. "Why?" She's leverage," the man gasped. "The senator." Adrian fired once. The answer didn't matter. The sound echoed like punctuation, the end of something that never should have begun. He stepped over the body and made for the stage. The bulb above Lena still swung, slower now, its dim light revealing her face. Pale, eyes wide, wrists raw from the ropes. "Adrian?" she whispered. He froze at the sound of her voice. The gun slipped from his hand. For a moment the world went silent again. No gunfire, no shouting, just the rain and her breath and the faint hum of survival. He crossed the distance in 3 long strides, dropping to his knees beside her. "Did they hurt you?" His voice cracked on the last word. She shook her head, tears spilling freely now. "No, not after." He cut the ropes with a blade from his pocket, his movements sharp but trembling. When she was free, she collapsed against him. Her hands clutched his soaked shirt like she needed proof. He was real. Behind them, a groan echoed. One of the men still breathing. Adrian turned, eyes narrowing. "Don't," Lena whispered. "Please, it's over." He stood anyway, retrieving the gun from the floor. "Not yet." "Adrian!" He aimed without looking back. "You think I don't know what this makes me?" Her voice broke. "It makes you human." The shot rang out, final and merciless. Silence followed, heavy, absolute. When it was done, he dropped the weapon. It clattered across the floor, sliding into the dark. His hands were shaking now, not from anger, but from something deeper, something hollow. Lena rose, unsteady, and touched his shoulder. He flinched, not from her, but from himself. "Don't look at me," he murmured. "She did anyway. I already am." He turned then, and for the first time she saw it, the crack in the armor, the raw, unguarded grief in his eyes. "I told you I'd protect you," he said quietly, "even if it means losing what's left of my soul." She stepped closer, her fingers trembling as they reached for his face. "Then let me hold what's left." For a heartbeat, neither moved. The rain fell harder, streaming through the broken roof, soaking them both. The air smelled of rust and redemption. Adrian closed his eyes, leaning into her touch like a man starving for warmth. His body shook, not from fear, not from the blood staining his hands, but from the unbearable relief of finding her alive. "I tried to be better," he whispered. "All my life, I tried. I know. It doesn't wash off. Maybe it doesn't need to." Her voice was soft, certain. "Maybe what you did tonight wasn't about who you were. It was about who you refused to let them make me become." He let out a sound halfway between a laugh and a sob. "You shouldn't forgive me." "I'm not forgiving you," she said. "I'm choosing you." That broke him. Adrian pulled her against him, his hands tangled in her hair, his forehead pressed to hers. Around them, the ruined theater stood silent, the rain their only witness. The city outside would wake to another headline, another whisper of scandal. But in this place, where monsters and music once lived, there was only the quiet rhythm of two hearts still beating, stubborn and bruised. When she finally pulled back, she looked at him, blood on his collar, shadows under his eyes, and said the only thing that mattered. "You came for me." He nodded. "Always." The storm outside began to break. Dawn seeped through the cracks of the old theater, pale and hesitant. Lena took his hand, their fingers lacing together, the same hand that had destroyed men now held by the woman he destroyed himself to protect. "Let's go home," she said. Adrian looked around at the ruin, the shattered glass, the spilled blood, the ghosts of his choices, and then back at her. He managed a faint smile. "If there's anything left of it." Together, they walked out of the theater, the rain washing their footprints away. And for a moment, just a moment, it almost looked like absolution. The stage was smaller this time. No chandeliers, no marble floors, no champagne laughter echoing through a hall of gilded ghosts. Just wood, worn smooth by decades of footsteps, and soft light spilling across a dozen chairs in a modest recital room. The air smelled faintly of resin and rain. Lena adjusted the violin beneath her chin. Her bow hovered in the air, waiting. The world beyond the stage had changed. Some said the senator had resigned. Others whispered about the mysterious collapse of half a political dynasty. None of them mentioned Adrian Kade, at least not aloud. His empire still stood, quiet and untouchable, but his face had vanished from the public eye. And yet, tonight, she could feel him here, in the back row, in the stillness between breaths, in the heartbeat of every note she was about to play. When the first sound came, it was nothing like the polished perfection of her past. It was raw, human, wound and healing stitched together in melody. Each stroke of her bow carved through silence, sorrow first, then rage, then something softer, something unnameable. The audience listened without moving. The music didn't invite applause. It invited confession. She thought of her brother, finally home from the hospital, laughing again. She thought of the headlines that had vanished overnight, the stories rewritten, the names erased, and she thought of him, the man who had rewritten her life in blood and silence, Adrian Kade. When the final note fell, the hall stayed quiet a moment too long. Then came the applause. Gentle, genuine, nothing like the forced thunder of the gala that had changed everything. Lena lowered her bow, breathing in the warmth of it all, but her eyes went immediately to the back. He was there, standing, not clapping, watching, black suit, no tie, the same quiet gravity as the night he'd first said her name like a warning and a vow. Their eyes met across the room. The crowd blurred, faded. The only thing real was the steady thrum in her chest. She smiled, small, trembling, and he inclined his head once, like an acknowledgement of something sacred. Backstage, the world dimmed again. The applause faded into murmurs, footsteps, the rustle of coats. Lena was packing her violin when she heard the door open. "You're early," she said without turning. "I didn't want to miss the last note." She looked up. Adrian stood in the doorway, rain still clinging to his coat. He looked exhausted, not from battle, but from being alive. He didn't belong to that world anymore, she realized. Not the world of power or punishment. He'd become something else entirely. "You kept your promise," she said softly. He stepped closer, his eyes on her, not the instrument in her hands. Always. Her fingers brushed the edge of her violin case. "Even if it cost you everything?" He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that looked like surrender. Especially then. For a moment they just stood there. No words, no noise, only the hum of the city outside and the faint echo of her music still hanging in the air. She studied him the way she once studied sonatas, with equal parts reverence and ache. The hard lines of his jaw, the quiet grief in his gaze, the subtle tremor in his hand that hadn't gone away since that night. He had killed for her, protected her, saved her, and in doing so, he had damned himself a little further. She stepped forward, fingers tracing the lapel of his coat. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "I know." "Then why come?" He tilted his head slightly. "Because I needed to see you play again, to remind myself there's still something in this world that sounds like forgiveness." She exhaled, a soft laugh catching in her throat. "That's not what it was." "No," he admitted. "It was survival, but it's beautiful, what you've made of it." Silence lingered between them. The good kind, the kind that feels earned. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a folded piece of sheet music. "I found this," he said, "in my father's study years ago. He commissioned it for someone, never said who. I think it was meant for my mother." Lena unfolded it carefully. The notes were old, faded, but the melody, it was hauntingly familiar. "I think it's unfinished," she murmured. Adrian's voice dropped low. "Then finish it." She nodded once, eyes glistening. "With you?" He smiled again, softer this time. "Always." Outside, thunder rolled far in the distance, the kind that promised rain without the storm. Lena packed her violin, slipped on her coat, and turned to him. "I used to think safety meant peace," she said quietly. "Now I know it means being loved by the one person the world should fear." He didn't answer. He didn't have to. He reached for her hand, and she let him take it. Together, they stepped out into the night, into a city still humming with secrets and power and all the things they'd chosen to leave behind. For once, Adrian didn't walk ahead, and Lena didn't follow. They moved side by side, their shadows long and unbroken on the wet pavement, And though neither of them said the words, both understood what the silence meant. The monster hadn't vanished. He had simply found something worth protecting in the light,